I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Okay, roll call, Lynn.
All right, Corey Coe,
Here.
Mary Darian is absent. Tom
Here.
and Lynn,
Here,
Nora Cole,
There.
John,
I think so.
and Philip absent.
Okay. Public meeting participation rules. Please wait for the chair to acknowledge you before you speak. 2, begin by stating your name and address. 3, give us your comments, opinions, or questions on the issue being discussed. 4, to ensure that everyone has time to speak, that we can address other items on the agenda. We will limit individual speaking time to 5 minutes. If time permits, we may allow you one additional time period to provide new information. 5, please be respectful of the planning commission, applicant, and your neighbors. Thank you for attending. Tom Hilberg, Chair. Okay, adoption of agenda.
I make a motion to adopt the.
Lynn
A second.
and John, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Okay. Approval of minutes of April 8th, 2024.
I'll make a motion.
Corey
I second.
and Dylan. All in favor? Opposed. Okay, public comment. Nothing?
We have nobody in person or
Okay.
online.
Do we want to elect officers after,
No, I mean, we can do this, I think that's fairly quick. I did, so Michelle's not here this evening, but, she did, say, she's gonna be serving an extension of a term, so I'll be taking that to the Board of Trustees. And that she requested, this because she's not here. Don't make her chair, don't put her in a position she doesn't want to be in. So that was her only ask.
She's not here, so.
I know. Last time we did that, I had to find a new person. So hard, it might be a secretary. So
Oh,
I would just say, talk amongst yourself. I mean, I'm open to whatever that scenario is. There are some motions, we'll have to follow format. But
okay, so what,
Make a motion to elect someone as
Okay.
chair.
make a motion to elect,
I make a motion to elect Norm as trustee.
Norm can't be
No.
a chair. He's
Oh,
the-
just
he's
chair.
elected. Okay,
Chair.
so Corey
So
as
you're.
trustee.
What
right?
are
That's
we
what
making
we're
a
doing?
motion?
no, chair.
Chair,
All you
chair.
guys are on the board.
I make a motion to elect somebody on the chair.
Good.
Tom,
Tom.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I will.
Oh,
I don't
gotcha.
think we need to.
I thought we were doing.
Yeah.
Like Trowbridge just
Yeah.
elect you to everything?
Yes, that's why I was electing you to everything. Okay, okay. So for the present, whatever,
Chair.
Tom,
Yes, I would do.
Second.
okay.
So we're gonna
See,
do a roll
here I was
call.
confused.
Okay,
Okay, so Dylan made a motion to elect Tom Hilbert as chair, supported by John Stender. And the roll call would be Corey,
Yes.
Tom,
yes.
and Lynn,
Yes,
Nora,
Yes.
and John.
Yes.
All right, the next one would be vice chair.
Vice.
then.
Okay.
no, it's,
Well, it was
It
Michelle.
was
And
Michelle.
you,
Was Michelle not
Doesn't
doing
mind
it
doing
now?
that, or?
She doesn't mind, but she did say that she's got a lot of travel with
Okay.
her work. And she doesn't want to feel that she's not fulfilling that role. Not that vice chair carries a lot of weight, but if you're not available, then vice chair of this commission actually is the appointee that runs the meeting. So.
You're always here.
Well, I'm here, yeah, most of the time.
so it's not.
I make a motion, we leave Michelle in the position.
I second.
Okay.
Norm, you're pretty quiet.
all right. So, John Stender made a motion to elect Michelle Woodruff as vice chair, supported by Dylan Paul. The roll call vote is Corey,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Dylan,
Yes,
Nora,
Yes.
and John.
Sure.
Okay,
Who's the second? Lynn.
They're really, I don't know.
I think you are.
Only when she's not here.
Well, it's a default position because we've
Oh.
we've modernized, because historically, the secretarial position on this commission also took minutes. So now we're actually facilitating that function. That where we do by organizational structure, still have a secretary.
Oh.
on this.
I make a motion that we leave Ms. Delin as secretary. Pro forma. I'll support that.
Secretary pro tem.
Yeah,
All right, so Johnson made a motion to elect Lynn Foley as secretary, supported by Norm Foley. Roll call vote, Corey,
yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Lynn,
Yes.
Norm,
Yes.
and John.
Yes. You
Motion
vote
passed.
for yourself.
And we don't have anything else.
I can't vote for him.
Okay,
Do we,
you did?
that capital improvement, but that's not really,
That's still in the works. I'm working with Munetrix. They're actually putting together a program that will be pretty nice. So I look at if unless we have a bunch of cases at next month's meeting, that will be that topic. I looked at, because they didn't get the whole package together to lay out, there'll actually be kind of workshops going through, CIPs as a refresher course for the planning commission. And I've already put together some, I think, a handful of projects that would represent things that need to be on the CIP. So that way you guys can feel it out. But tonight's principle is something that I've been kind of standing on, because there's some legislative things that have been in the works. Those have kind of somewhat come to fruition. So what you have before you today, and what the topic of conversation, and this is also going to be a fairly short and concise introduction. We have Denise Klein on telephone tonight. But this has been an issue, especially over the past year and a half, 2 years of short-term rentals. And the best course of action is we delayed, let a lot of other municipalities work out the kinks and the bugs. But now is the time that we start actually with the legislation that's kind of taken place to really actually look at how this looks. As a rider, it pretty much would be an ordinance, but also interface with our zoning as a permitted use in pretty much any zone. But short-term rentals have a mechanism that defeat our zoning. Because when you have residential areas that get bombarded with short-term rentals, the characteristics of that neighborhood really do suffer. Because you're having every other weekend new people, and they're usually in town for one thing, and it's not to go to
Not to study.
not to study or go to a church convention.
Yeah.
So this is the time to introduce this conversation. So Denise, are you there?
I am still here. I'm operating
bars.
on 2 bars. I'm on 2 bars still, so it's working. I'm in my car in the parking lot of another township that I'm meeting with at 7, and it seems to be working okay, but if I disappear, you'll know why.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So this
yeah,
is the
so I mean,
introduction.
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to introduce, we don't need to take care of any business. This
Yeah.
needs to be a well thought out approach to how we should
Okay.
look at and consider STRs. But the conversation will start tonight.
Okay.
So Denise, floor
Oh,
is
you-
yours.
excuse me, Denise, you wrote, what we're looking at right now, you wrote, is this something you wrote?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. I've been
Okay.
I've been using different versions of this language in each community. You're looking at the latest one because I added a few things for the last community that asked for it. So just so you know, this issue is, I think I would say the second most common thing that I get asked about, with solar energy being the first and battery storage being the second. And I would place short-term rentals as third, because I think a lot of the communities in our region, well, not just in our region, but are feeling the effects as they have citizens come to them and say, what can we do about this? Because I hear, all night long, I'm hearing this, noise, I have this problem, and the whole characteristic of our neighborhood is changing. So I think that's why I'm getting more and more requests for ordinances like this. This one is similar to one that Presque Isle Township put in place. Again, it's not exact. I kind of wanted to give you sort of an example of a lot of different things, but this is very similar to Presque Isle Townships. And I feel like they've had a pretty successful time at doing this. I worked with them and their attorney, which I think is your attorney also. I don't know if might have been 2 years. I can't even remember. It's all, time is a blur to me, but right now, but I think it was a couple of years ago to put an ordinance in place, and because they were getting a lot of complaints from, well, from neighboring property owners, but then, when they started talking about, well, maybe we should regulate short-term rentals, then, the short-term rental owners started coming to the meetings and talking. So what they did in the end was they got a subcommittee together where they had, on one side of the table was short-term rental owners, the other side of the table was neighboring properties. And, they just talked about like, okay, what can we put in place that's reasonable enough that kind of makes everybody happy or everybody unhappy, whichever, right? Same thing. So, this is kind of what they came up with. Again, it's not the same exact text, it's similar. And what their attorney recommended is, to have the ordinance be outside of their zoning and to have it referenced in their zoning. So right now it's not even in your use table. Okay, so basically we defined it in the zoning ordinance, we put it in the use table as a permitted use. And instead of referencing Article 7, like we do with all of the other specific uses in your ordinance, basically we referenced in their ordinance, we just said, okay, put a link to this standalone ordinance, then it's a police power ordinance that was adopted, by the township board. So again, it's not a zoning ordinance. So it goes through just the regular ordinance adoption procedures. And I think the reason for doing that is that there's not a grandfathering problem at that point. So it can't be that, oh, well, these short-term rentals were operating before we put it in our zoning ordinance, so they don't have to operate according to this ordinance because they're just if you put it in the zoning, they're non-conforming. They might be non-conforming to this specific text because they were operating beforehand. Well, you don't want that. So that's why, you take it outside and you put it into a police power ordinance. So everybody has to conform to it. All of the short-term rentals in the community, instead of having any that are non-conforming that were operating prior. So I hope that makes sense. I don't know how you want to, Nathan, I can go through the ordinance or just kind of give you a summary. Like, I think the first thing is to determine like what's our goal, right? Is it just to have some standards in place? Is the goal just to have an approval process in place so that you can track them, where they are? You've maybe got, like this ordinance says, you've got a local contact person for that if the township starts getting complaints, who's responsible, you have it's kind of like the marijuana ordinance, right? Where you had marijuana listed in you have marijuana facilities listed in your zoning, but then they're operated out. The ordinance that governs them is a standalone ordinance, and you have a licensing procedure. It's the same thing, basically. Then I guess my next question, and I know these are all things you're going to have to discuss, but is a goal going to be to try to limit the number of them in the township, which you can do? Other communities, some of them do try to limit the total number. You could limit, a distance between them so you don't get a whole bunch of them together. I guess there's lots of things to talk about. So I'm not sure, like, where do you guys want to start in terms of talking about this issue?
What does the city of Alpena have? Are they working on something similar?
They're working on one as well.
Okay, yeah, similar.
Yep.
Obviously, all right, similar to this, I take it. I mean, I would think that ours would be somewhat. I mean, it's hard to tell where the city ends and the township starts in most.
Yeah, and theirs would fall under, they've got a rental registration, rental inspection program. I don't think you guys have that, do you? In the township?
No, we do not. We're ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, so they're a little bit different. So theirs is going to look a little bit different because they're not just starting from scratch. theirs would be sort of embedded within that rental registration and inspection program that they already have. So, you've got to think a little bit more comprehensive just because you don't have some of those processes already in place. So it can be similar, but different. But I guess, I think personally, you need to address it because not having anything in your ordinance, they're right now just falling under residential. I mean, they're just, I guess, considered a residential use, but I think as you get more and more of them, it's going to start to become apparent that you need some kind of standards and some kind of registration program. Presque Isle Township has their licensing program. I think theirs is, now again, I don't have theirs right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure they have like a $500 a year fee, a license fee that that gets renewed each year. And I don't know that much more about it because, I was involved in the creation and then not so much the administration of it afterwards, but I think it's been pretty successful. I haven't heard of a whole lot of problems. So, I mean, those are the first issues to talk about is just, what's the goal? Is it just to track them, just to have some standards? Is it to limit them? And then we can go on and talk about these specific standards. I don't think any of them here are, I guess, some of them are pretty basic. That limiting the number of occupants per structure, that's probably the most detailed stuff. I think that's on page 2 and 3. Not every community does that. The ones that do that are doing that to try and, try to avoid the situation where you've got, 18 people staying in one house, and that really does cause a disturbance to the neighbors. I guess first probably ought to talk about what's the goal. So I guess I'd kind of like to hear, what everybody thinks about that. Like, what are your goals for having something like this?
Well, a lady, complained about this at one of our meetings. I can't remember her name. I think Susan.
Yep.
I think her name was. I don't remember her last
Okay.
name.
Well, it could be Skibby.
Yes. Oh, yeah, that was it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and most of these things.
well, and so I'm that interface. And so this has been kind of brewing for quite a while because I take a lot of complaints when it comes to
Yeah.
short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's okay. So how do we, to me personally, I don't know if there's any inherent value to limiting it because what we found out with other municipalities, when you put a cap on it, you also open up a door to being sued.
Yeah.
Because now you
Yep.
have, well, you let them, why not me?
Yeah.
So I'm not so worried about the limitation. I think the biggest thing that we need to get out of it is a tracking mechanism. And if that tracking mechanism or aka registration has a fee associated with it, so be it. The biggest thing I see is identifying where they're at, having a point of contact. So when we get complaints or a process therein of X amount of complaints and you lose that ability, some kind of a corrective action associated with it. But other than that, I want you guys to have some skin in this game because, I mean, we need to address it. Check. That's the easiest part.
Yep.
So
I think we had, whatever we do, it's gotta have something's got some teeth in it, so that you can't do this, then we should be able to do something to counteract that.
yeah, I think if you get X amount of complaints at this address of an Airbnb, you lose your license.
Yes.
You're disallowed from it. There has to be a process and a checks and balances to,
So is there a license then if they have an Airbnb right now?
No.
So they would come to
No.
you.
we
pay a fee.
would, so that's where Denise was saying, I mean, we're behind that curve. I agree with Chair Hilberg in terms of having some correlation and standards similar to that of the city, because our municipal lines are that close. It makes sense to have a lot of similarities. That way, if somebody rents a place in the city for a night and then at least there's some similarity, or at least with those owners, there's a similar process. We'll never, as far as I know, we'll never be doing short-term rentals or in terms of inspections.
Policing them, yeah.
So it's
Right.
identifying, posting that, but really the backside of it, and the most important, besides knowing where they're at and who was a point of contact for that property, is a corrective course of actions.
Yeah.
First call is, hey, point of contact. This is your warning. You had renters beep, beep, beep. And then second, 3 strikes, you're out kind of a scenario, or if it's 4. And if they want to reapply, then maybe there's an economic threshold that now ratchets up to another economic value of, hey, you can get your license back next season, but it's going to cost you something like that. Because if people don't have consequence to their action, they're just going to continue to do it.
Yeah.
As soon as I pull out of the driveway.
Yeah, one of the things that we need to think about, like that idea of if you have so many violations, let's say in a year, you don't get your license the next year. I mean, you're just automatically turned down. And one of the things that will have to be a discussion point is what constitutes that. So what is a violation? Does it mean you're actually writing a ticket, or does that mean, you have to call the sheriff's department and have them, if they go out and make a visit because they got a complaint, does that count? Like, is it a police report got written, so the whole enforcement part of it, we really need to think out.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's probably something to sit around the table and, work it out first, because that's a complicated one, because it all depends on how you're going to enforce it. Do you guys write tickets? Do you have, is it going to be, are you going to work with the sheriff's department to do it? Because some of these complaints are going to come late. They're going to come in the middle of the night, maybe even because somebody's partying. So, I mean, there's lots of things to think about.
So could I ask
yeah.
one question right there? It's a beautiful segue. So if we utilize Alpena County Sheriff's Department to go about our ordinance, one of the things I know, and 3 times a year, legitimately only 3 times a year, I get the request for a noise ordinance. I'm extremely fearful of that, just because of the nuances of, you have to have a machine that costs tens of thousands of dollars. It has to be calibrated. You have to have somebody. And plus, I'll be up, well, technically with the newborn, I guess I'll be up anyways throughout the night. So if I get a call, I could leave, but if I'm feeding them. So there's, like I said, right out the gate, this is really, the purpose of this conversation tonight is to get your creative juices. You have some documents before you, and start saying, okay, how do we want to look at this? What does it look like? We're starting from fresh. We're going to have to create a database. At first, obviously, my biggest part is getting people that are already established Airbnbs or looking into it to simply register. It doesn't need to be a mechanism where it's a money maker by any means, but it could be a filing fee of $50 annually. It could be something low, but they have to have some skin in the game and know that there's consequences. And that's the heavier lift, because I think I've already asked Ms. Klein if she is available for the next month's meeting. That way we can kind of really expound on this conversation. But what does this look like from your seats? I know I've seen it, and I get it. I mean, I don't want to, I'm a unique property rights versus zoning. It's the age old argument. If I need to make money, you're not going to tell me that I can't use my property to make money. Correction. Yeah, we can, because we're on this threshold of residential use versus commercial activity. And so we have to have something in place. Like I said, I'm not looking to get rich as a township by charging $500 for an application or whatever it may be, but having an associated cost with a filing fee will always get people's attention, and they'll always have a little bit more onus and impotence in terms of how to move forward. The bigger lift is what are those corrective actions, and how do you go about that?
And I think at the beginning, if you say, I mean, because that's an issue, we got to identify all of them and make sure they're all registered. I think it's doable. It's just going to there's going to have to be a push, whether that's, do you have a township newsletter that goes out by any chance?
No, but we always have, and I know that it'd blow my treasurer's mind if I put together a newsletter and put it in tax flyers. Because she's a queen of clip
Okay.
art. But so we have a mechanism. We have 2 mass
Okay.
mailers. I think that would probably be the best way.
Yep.
And honestly, once we have this conversation and get things kind of worked out, it may be one of those scenarios where we kind of hold on to it and do a startup later. Push out one big mailer to all property owners and say, hey, coming soon, short-term rentals. Identify. I think
Yeah.
before you're the big bad bear dressed in black like Johnny Cash, you want to get them to be openly accepting the fact that they want to log in and identify their properties as short-term. That honey works
Yeah.
better than the opposite. So let's stick with honey as long as we can, but we know that we're going to have to talk about the compost at some point in time. So that's really where I wanted to start this, is we need something. And it's getting worse and worse because now you're starting to see some shell corporations buying properties just to use for Airbnbs. It's not huge in our
Yep.
community yet, but they're here.
It's happening.
And so let's counteract, let's protect the value that we already have in our zoning mechanism and keep those neighborhoods the way that this commission really kind of helped forge and design them. I mean, the last thing you want to do when you've had a hard week and you live on the water is see your newest neighbor after the old neighbor 2 days ago left, and now you got a new one, and it's a bad cycle. So having something in place, and I think it's always the adage of there's always one bad apple, but how are we going to address that apple? I mean, and in your experience, Ms. Klein, have you actually had any communication or any contact with like Airbnb or VRBO or any of the other companies that are used for?
No,
Okay.
I actually have not. Although some of the planning commissions that I work with, like there's one in particular, they are a short-term rental owner. So, they say that really those companies, I mean, they want good owners. So like owners that are violating local ordinances, that's not what they want, because they don't want to be advertising those types of short-term rentals on their sites, because if they're the ones that are, they're going to get the complaints basically. So, I mean, their goal is to have good owners that don't violate. So, I mean, I don't think anything we're saying here goes against, what those companies want. The thing we want to make sure is during, when the short-term rental owners, when they're advertising on those sites like Airbnb, that they're not advertising, like, let's say you guys have a limit to how many people that they can have per bedroom, right? That's a common one. So we want to make sure they're not advertising for more occupants than what you all allow. So that's the main thing that, connects, I guess, to those companies, is just making sure that what you say is allowed is the same thing that they're advertising on those sites. So, but I haven't spoken to them, specifically.
Yes. So, I mean, maybe it's a progression. I mean, you pass an ordinance and in year 1, all you're trying to do is gather data. And then you kind of escalate it. And then after year 2 or year 1, okay, now we have a database. And then you say you have a mailer to that database and saying, and they know when they fill out the paperwork. So it's not a surprise, coming soon in 2025 or the spring of 26, the annual fee for an Airbnb. You almost need a full solid year. At least that's my thought.
Yeah. Well,
to get people
remember
buying.
this.
What was that, Denise?
Yeah, and remember this also is that with the bills that are in the legislature right now, only one of them is addressing local, ordinances, which basically says, yes, you are allowed to regulate them. I mean, it's a lot different than the other bill that had gotten proposed that said you have to treat them like a residential use. So this one says, yes, you can regulate them, but all of the companion bills talk about the taxation structure, and included in that is the state itself is going to develop a database of these things because they're going to tax them. So I mean, if the state's working on it, then they better be sharing that database with us so that, that'll make your job easier in terms of getting everybody registered because you'll know who they are because they're in the tax structure now. So that's the other thing to watch, I guess.
Yeah, if that bill passes, that'd be great. And then you already have it. So that's
Well,
just,
there's
that's,
a if, right?
yeah.
Right.
So, I think this is a good springboard for the conversation, but what are those nuances? How, to me, it's, I see it as, okay, we can pass an ordinance that's separate from our zoning. And it's a police power ordinance, easy enough. Tim's familiar with it. But what are those thresholds and what is the true aim of it? To me, let's use honey up front and get people that are, I think the vast majority of people that are renting out their properties have the best intent. But there's always those handful that well, you're not going to tell me what to do. But those are oftentimes the ones that we're getting complaints on is the police said they couldn't do anything because the noise was too loud. Well, if we get away from the noise ordinance, because I'm there again, not a staunch proponent for a noise ordinance. And technically we have one, but it's so fine tuned. It's for moving vehicles and when subwoofers that were the big thing in the 90s. So it's not applicable to us, but if we have an ordinance for short-term rentals and we do get those complaints and we work out an arrangement with the sheriff's department, which we already have, they would actually have that ability to enact and enforce our ordinance. And so it's a win-win. Biggest thing up front, identifying, capturing, and then moving into that next phase of now that we have this database and we can research and try to fill in some missing gaps, but then, a year in saying, when you register this next year at this time, this is the filing fee. And everybody takes, anytime I have to put money for anything, it's like, oh, should take it a little bit more serious than 4 letters called free.
Skin in the game.
Yep. So that's pretty much the premise of this introductory aspect is you have some examples before you. You have some legislation language that is looking at some potentials there. But I wanted to have this conversation. It's been a long time coming. I've been figuring out for when are we going to pull the trigger, and I've watched this topic pop up in through MTA and massive successes and even more massive failures with other ordinances around the state and how to control it. And so to me, I'm open to however we move forward because something's better than nothing. To me, it's let's identify them, create the database, go in incremental steps. Maybe that state bill passes and now we have a taxable aspect where we have that interface and we have a good checks and balances there. But we can't sit on our laurels in hopes that our legislators are going to push anything through at any given time. So let's have this conversation.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think this was more so just to plant the seed. And then we can come back to this next month and start really looking at it. Talk to people that have Airbnbs, talk to everybody, people that live next to people that rent out.
Yep.
Get that and say, hey, we're having this conversation. Get people vested in coming to this meeting and saying, we're not trying to surprise anybody, but you're a taxpayer that lives next to address 123, and that's rented out to every other weekend all year round.
Mhm.
It's to their disadvantage. It defeats the character of that neighborhood. And that's somebody that's a year-round resident that's paying taxes in our community that's actually not represented completely to some extent isn't really given that afforded luxury of just being a residence or just being a waterfront area. It's a commercial activity. And so how do we want to identify?
I guess that's my thing. So say, we put something together where it's gonna be 3-4 strikes, you're out, too many parties at your Airbnb. But what if that neighbor just hates that you're doing that in general, and that one neighbor, every time you have it rented out, is, you know, calling and making a complaint every single time, and they know you have 3 strikes and they want to just shut you down, you know, like how would
When
you?
I step in things that smell bad,
Yeah.
I'm pretty keen to it.
Mhm.
7.5 years in now,
Mhm.
90% of the time when I get complaints, it's a neighbor.
Mhm, right,
With
exactly.
any of our, with
Yeah.
any of our ordinances. So henceforth, yeah, how do you identify and acknowledge the fact that you're gonna have Karen? I feel so bad for the good Karens out there. But you have somebody that's purposefully, I really do. Purposefully trying to undermine
Right.
that
Like,
activity.
how do you regulate that, you know?
Yeah,
Mhm.
and then so you regulate it
Yeah.
by making sound language, and you have to have verifiable, it's not just word of mouth. I mean, it would be, hey, we have a complaint, then
Like,
call.
would you go as far as saying you have to have like a justified police report per complaint?
It
you
could
know,
be-
to
it could be
charged?
something
Like if the
like that.
police agree that, hey, this was out of control.
Or you have.
Not
Yeah.
just neighbors saying.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
They're out of control. But they weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go fire at 9 o'clock at night.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, or
You know what I
allow,
mean? Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, yeah, like that
Yeah.
Well, who's to say that?
tiny house we did on the Narrows there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That those people were here complaining about it, but they didn't even know the people that were, they were complaining about some other
Yeah.
lot.
they complain because the error isn't to their.
Well, yeah, I know, but and
I mean, and they don't,
they
when
had
they
you
go
on
to the
speed dial,
bathroom, they're
but
not.
the people that were doing the tiny house followed every rule.
Oh, yeah. Impeccably. And it's actually one of the, it's per square foot, one of the nicest homes in Gilbert Circle. But yeah, I mean, what are those mechanisms? Is it an interface? I mean, I can, to the next meeting, I could ask Sheriff Smith to be here. We're already in contract with the sheriff's department. So what is it? Is it an escalation of aspects? Is it, you know, if you have a police report, that counts as 2 strikes? Or is it, because I mean, you could get, I don't know what it looks like, long and short. But to your point, Corey, is, yeah, you're gonna have to figure out, and like I said, I mean, my BS meter is pretty accurate. And when you get the same person calling all the time, that wheel doesn't always get the grease. So, but what are those mechanisms to identify that procedurally? Great question. But
There's gonna be a lot of gray area for sure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So do any of your other clients, have like that, have this in force right now, Denise? And what are their experiences if they've told you?
Yeah, a whole bunch of them have it. A lot of them have it within their zoning because, you know, I don't think they were too concerned about making it, you know, basically retroactive to everybody that's doing it in the community. So they just don't have a lot of them. Prescott Township's the only one that I know of that has it outside of their zoning. And I mean, I don't know specifically I haven't heard any complaints other than I've heard they're enforcing it. I mean, I could find out, you know, how is it working? You know, how do you guys enforce it? Do they use the sheriff's department? I can find out some details from them, if that helps.
Good.
So,
Anything
I
would help,
guess-
yeah.
yeah. No, here's just a
Okay.
question that popped up in my brain. You talked about a cap or a ceiling towards total number of Airbnbs or short STRs. What if, could
Yeah.
you say, X amount in waterfront residential, X amount in R1? Could you actually coordinate it by zone? Or
Yep.
does it just have
Yep,
to
you
say?
can. No, you can do it. You can do it by zoning district.
Well,
How do you pick and choose who you're gonna allow and who you're not?
well, when it's full, it's full.
So first come.
First come, first serve is the easiest way if you were to ever put a cap. And not saying that I'm a proponent for capping it, but you have to look at our zoning as it currently stands. Our most valuable areas are from waterfront moving back through our residential 1. And so do we want to protect those areas because those are a higher precedent of use of Airbnbs and actually are higher taxable value properties to begin with? I don't know. But that's where I'd say, at least what I know of in terms of Airbnbs in the township, that's over 75% are on water, and rightfully so. I mean,
Yeah.
that's- so. Yeah, we're not going to solve the world's problems tonight. I just wanted to introduce this because we can keep it short and sweet. I know Denise is gonna be hopping into Vienna for hopefully a little hot dog. Now, Vienna Township, is that Clio, Michigan?
Montmorency.
So yeah,
Sure.
yep, I'm in
Montmorency or
Montmorency
Otsego is
County.
that?
Otsego, isn't it?
I'm in Montmorency County. It's
Montmorency,
in
okay.
Montmorency. It's just on
Not
the
Prescott, don't give me any.
Montmorency side of the border.
Yeah, I
Um,
Googled
never been here
it and
before,
it
so
said
they-
you're
they
down by
called me-
Clio.
Yeah, so they called me into a meeting. I don't know what they want to talk about, so I'm just gonna wing it.
All right.
So I
God
think
bless
it's
you.
probably zoning related though, or they wouldn't be calling me.
Well, then,
So nobody's here
will-
yet though. I'm getting a little worried.
yeah, so this is what I would ask of you, Ms. Klein, is that maybe for our subsequent meeting, if I can reserve an hour of your time or so. And if you
Okay.
can get some more background from other municipalities of how they've actually facilitated. That way we can expound this conversation because it's quite a bit to digest. But I
Yep.
think that it's a discussion that we need to have. So,
Okay, that sounds good.
Thank you.
well,
Thank
any
you
other,
all.
Any other questions for?
you
I'm
got a
sorry.
couple seconds with Miss Klein, throw something at her. Otherwise, you have a wonderful meeting, unbeknownst to you what the topic is going to be, but, shoot Lynn and I an email with, maybe some other, data points, and we'll get those to the planning commission members and, prepare to have a more robust conversation at our subsequent meeting.
Too much information is not a bad thing.
Okie
We're,
dokie, I can
we're
do that.
learning, So.
Thank you
Yep.
very much, Denise.
All right, thanks. Bye.
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 It's, you guys have rented, right?
Not
Rent-
short-term rental.
Not short term?
So what constitutes short-term rental?
1 to 30 days.
Okay, so maybe we have this night
So-
if you stayed in our cottage.
So that's
Well,
like,
We didn't charge.
that's like every rental then.
No, because a rental by definition is monthly, which is at that 30
Right.
30 plus one. So those are rentals, and we're not gonna get into a rental program like the city has,
Okay,
because I like to have a building.
yeah,
And he told
It
me
ain't worth
that
it.
he would put this somewhere else. I don't want
Yeah.
that to be part of
in your hand. Keep it away.
it. And so this is 1 to 30 days. And that's, I've given consideration of how do we say anything less than 10 days, but I mean, 1 to 30 is literally the legal language at this point in time for. a
Okay.
short-term.
I know somebody that rents like by the week, but only 3 weeks a summer. And that's it.
So that would fall into.
Yeah, but then they would still apply, but that's what I'm saying, honey is the best, I think is the best way.
Yeah.
I don't wanna put $500, I mean, we'd have to justify. Now, we could look at potentials of an escrow or, but that gets sloppy in terms of
Hmm.
bookkeeping, because
Yeah,
we need to have, if we have violations, we actually, the only economic driver I really wanna see is that if we have violations, we have to have a mechanism to capture costs that we're inherently gonna have for an administrative function or a legal function.
So what about if they're not doing anything wrong? They're in the database, they sign up with a contract. If they have a violation, could we just charge them per violation up to
We could.
3?
Yeah.
I mean, make it 100, 200, 500,
Escalated.
100, yeah. Maybe,
I'm saying, we're Patrick Swayze and Devin, we're making claims.
but you don't wanna penalize the people who aren't doing anything wrong.
Hmm.
So to
If
speak.
you charge them like, the more weeks that they're gonna rent, you get charged as much registration. So if you're only gonna rent 3 weeks of the year, you get this amount of registration. If you're gonna rent it 2 weeks, maybe you get charged for registration.
Well, then, I don't wanna go that far, because there again, they're going to be getting taxed at the state level.
mhm.
And rightfully so, because that's now a business activity. But is it just a $20 filing fee and the pain is when we get complaints, you get one freebie unless it's something horrible. And then you have an escalating factor of fines before you lose your ability to have that registered.
I guess on their defense, they don't know what kind of people are coming in and they would lose
Shame
it.
on them because
Yeah.
they should.
Well,
Because Michelle has her Airbnb on Princeton. And they have to actually, they look at everybody's profile. And
Mhm.
so, and I don't, I mean,
Yeah.
kids, I mean, parents and kids. to their
Mhm.
own thing, Let alone somebody that's randomly running a structure. But there has to be some accountability, because right now, the only people that are paying that toll are the residents that are year round on either side of that house. So it's like, they need something to feel better that, yeah, not to abuse it.
Have you been by Corey's every weekend?
Oh, it's
I
nasty.
guess.
What are we gonna do with people
It's-
like that live there year round and are out of control?
The Long like rod and gun club, that's something.
Yeah.
It's not even supposed to be there.
Right?
Especially after 5 p.m.
Yeah.
Yep.
No other rules.
Mhm.
Um,
Lot of questions.
not a thing's off limits in terms of how to look at it. This is, I think, a nice ordinance that this commission can really sink their teeth in. I mean, the last one that you guys really worked on was, cannabis. And so, let's hop on another. This is a good topic. I don't, like I said,
Whatever happened to that cannabis store, just run through south?
never,
It just fell apart.
Kaiser Sose.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Okay.
bet that gentleman, I actually, was, trying to get one of the other businesses. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
hop out there, that's.
Right.
Yeah. But, no, that never came to fruition, and so, by our zoning standards, that designation of, a dispensary actually stayed with the property for 1 year, and then at that point in time, or with no activity, that special use is thrown to the wayside. So it starts all over.
But there's a lot of stuff here. You got sprinkler system, smoke detectors. Yeah.
Smoke detectors and stuff you can do, a sprinkler system, you can never do.
Okay.
So it's just. Pour the water.
But who's gonna
Yeah.
police all this?
Yeah.
The sprinkler system and the
Yeah,
smoke
we're not
detectors and the
going to
fire
police.
alarm?
I think
Okay,
it's-
so
Yeah.
this is just like everything, and we can
Yeah, this-
line things
like
out,
you
because,
said,
yeah, like a sprinkler system.
this
If
would
you had to
go
put one of
a
those
lot.
in a short-term rental, it would cost more than, yeah.
Yeah, no, we're not going crazy. The biggest thing I see as the advantage is a database of known location. Which corresponds to a $20 fine, $50 annual fine. Nothing that's gonna break the bank, but there again, they have some skin in the game.
Mhm.
But the controls, good for you, but here are the rules, the rules are the rules, and boom, boom, boom. And if it's an escalating aspect, great. I haven't digested this enough to know how I would prefer to see it, and it's not for me or my preference. We need to have some. And so let's start with some honey, a filing, create a database. The heavier lift for you guys is, how do you want to look at corrective action? I mean, that's where it gets sticky.
There's a lot in it.
Yeah, that has everything.
And
Yeah, and most of it's ridiculous.
like, you're not,
the city handle
you're not gonna, what do we care if they have insurance?
So the
As
city,
far as
that's, so
Do we
Athens
care?
and
Do we
Orange
have
City
to go
actually
every year?
has,
Okay, need to do-
Yeah, that's why we go to church. and
So
who's gonna
they
keep
have-
that one? It's
No,
too-
Yeah,
the police, the entire police. department.
right. Because
Fairly
what are we
big.
gonna
So
do by
they have-
ourselves?
You're gonna start requesting all this, somebody's gotta manage it,
Yeah.
you know, so
Well, right.
they can't just drop it off. They
You
can
can't
do
go
it.
go home at 10 o'clock and
We
around
should
10 o'clock
police
at night,
this,
July,
you
it's still
know.
daylight out.
They are anyway.
You know,
That's just-
Yeah.
Fireworks start coming out about
That's
7:30.
everything, so
Yeah,
you
you
just
can look at it. and-
having good luck. It's just
7:30
very-
at night.
Yeah, be curious with it.
Fireworks and blaring. Well, we're not touching the noise by ordinance. No, I don't have it. But fireworks is supposed to be. 2 days. No, 3 days a year. You got July 3rd, July 4th, July 5th. You can't shoot. I mean, we always get these complaints too, and you can't disperse fireworks over an open body of water, that actually takes a permit for if it's Lake Huron by the Coast Guard. If it's in an enclosed water body, at Long Lake or Grand Lake, then that has a secondary permit by the local municipal, corrections office, whether it be the sheriff's department, Michigan Department of Natural Resources Conservation Office, or state police. I think maybe for the next meeting, I'll have the other sheriff. We'll get him over here. He knows where we're located. But get a point of view from law enforcement. How many times do you go to a place because of noise complaints or whatever the case may be? Disorderly, et cetera, and it's an Airbnb. At least that way you have a reference point of, okay, I don't think it happens. I think the bigger things for our residents is that it's free, not to know who your neighbor is any given day. And when you pay the property taxes and you have those inherent costs, I think that we should find some happy medium of, hey, they're allowed to do it. It's never been my intent to say that people can't use their properties in this manner. It's what happens when things go wrong. So. Corrective action is the back end, first end is a database of known locations.
Sounds good.
But she'll be here for next meeting. We can have more discussions. We'll get some more examples. As soon as Linda and I get them, we'll forward them on. Yeah, we can get hard copies for you.
Good.
And I'll actually ask either the sheriff or the undersheriff to be in attendance for that discussion. If there's anybody else in the short-term rentals, maybe I'll find somebody that I know rent out. Michelle Blanc, our clerk, is now using Airbnb on Princeton, R1 zone. See it, hear it from her side. She knows something's coming. And she's not opposed. I don't think the vast majority of people that are legitimately homeowners or property owners utilizing short-term rentals are bad actors by any means. It's just to your point. You never know who you're gonna get, you know, and are they? Friday night, they were great. Saturday night, they got into Jagermeister. And we know how Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Sitting on a park bench like Chris Christopherson. Sunday morning coming down. I'm all of them tonight.
Wow, you are just,
You were on it.
but that, read through this and, you know,
There's a lot.
put question marks where like, you know, sprinkler system,
Yeah.
things like
Cross
that.
it.
We don't. But like, you know, I mean, if you're gonna have. What, 2 to 12 or whatever the heck,
These are
12
ideas.
12 occupants total. That could be a lot of cars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And a
that's,
lot of these small lots. Wow.
yeah, they're 60 footers, you
Yeah.
know, not even.
That's, besides, that's one of the bigger aspects. It's not really just us. It's okay. You can have 18 people there, but. It's like our site plans. Where are people parking? Home occupation. Where's your parking?
They're gonna be busy driving around policing all this.
That permit that we did, out of Long Lake there. Just think if that guy decided that's gonna be a
An Airbnb.
well, there's no place to park. I mean, barely room for one car.
So maybe.
That, where the guy that's putting a second story on there at,
Oh,
but,
Next to
yeah,
Burn.
He has to
But,
back his car in.
you know, why would somebody like that could do that, could,
So maybe that's a threshold. You have to have adequate
True.
parking for anybody.
yeah.
Yeah, but favorite thing about that, tractor home depot, double yellow lines in front of the store, it's fire lane. That's all there, lawn, flowers.
Oh, yeah.
People are gonna pull in and they're like, well, I parked over there in the yard.
Oh.
That's a thing.
Things to think about.
Yeah.
If it's my yard, they're not gonna park there.
I don't think.
You got some nice grass.
Come and work on mine.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I just sprayed herbicide. No, so I think we'll have ample discussion next.
Cool.
But that's, I'm not looking to say that irrigation is wrong, we got.
No, but there- I can see a reason for it.
Yeah.
Because I know somebody that's got a place up on Dutchess. The place next door is an Airbnb and they finally had to put up a fence.
Yeah.
To keep them on their property, because it's only a 50-foot lot. And they'd have a bonfire and all of a sudden they're, you know. Everybody's partying, having a good time,
There's a
which,
tree over there.
yeah, and that's exactly what it is. Yeah,
Every time.
Never.
Yeah.
yeah,
I learned that.
I learned that the wrong way.
So, no, like, several of us make fine. But, no, so there's a lot of things. Parking would be a good thing, eliminating
Mhm.
that. You know, you may be able to, you have X amount of bedrooms. What does Michigan building code say? Is it three per bedroom, two per bedroom? Square footage, two per bedroom and one on the pillow. 3 bedroom, figure 7%. But did that, yeah. Parking, maybe that's a better threshold of limiting than just X amount of bodies. Yeah, you got wrong lake, you got every 50 foot, it's a new lot, and. Dude, I gotta run to the store or something bad happens, somebody needs to go to the ER, but there's 18 vehicles blocking it,
Mhm.
so, things are.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions for me? Before I
Nope.
start?
No.
Well, that'll sort it out.
Okay, anybody else have anything?
Make the motion to adjourn.
Support.
Everybody's supported.
I said it too, but.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?